All right, good afternoon. My name is Giovanna, and I am a senior majoring in biology at the Pennsylvania State University. Today I have the opportunity of speaking with Dr. Paul Turner. Dr. Paul Turner is now professor and chair of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at Yale University in Connecticut. He's also founded the laboratory at Yale devoted to studying virus ecology, virus evolution. Thank you, Professor, for accepting to talk with me today for my virus ecology class.
It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So to kick off the interview, let's start with a question going back in time a little. When you finished graduate school, what did you think you would be doing in your career, and how close is that to the reality of what has transpired?
Sure. So I finished graduate school in, I guess it was 1995, is when I got my degree. And I had entered graduate school wanting to be a professor at a research university. So I knew that in my heart of hearts, I wanted to continue doing science and doing it professionally, and to be working at a college or university where that was among my foremost responsibilities. But I also enjoy teaching. I enjoy the transfer of knowledge to students. And at a so-called Research One institution like Yale, my responsibilities are to run a research lab and to train people in guiding their one-on-one projects as graduate students and postdocs. And also I have a teaching load associated with my job. And for me, the balance of a lot of science and leading those projects and a fair amount of teaching, but not as much teaching as somebody would do at, say, a liberal arts college, that's really what I hoped to do, and I'm delighted that I was able to achieve that.
Okay. What part of your work gets you most excited?
Yeah, I think the part of my work that most excites me, there's two things. One is when I sit down with somebody in my lab group and we really first conceive of what a study could be. If there's some topic and some research organism, especially viruses, because I mostly study viruses, but we study a lot of different ones in my lab. When we sit down and we grapple with a problem of how do you design an experiment to test what viruses can do, to me I find that very exciting. And the other aspect of it is that when we get to the end of the process and when we actually complete an experiment, and here I should note that not all experiments go to completion. Often we'll design something improperly just because there was something we missed and we have to go back. But the point is, when we finally get to a point where we have an experiment that we are analyzing and it yielded results, it's that aha moment. I really love that, where we see exactly what the outcome is, and especially it's often that we miss in our prediction. It's not easy to predict things in science, and we construct hypotheses, and many of them are supported or refuted. But a lot of the aha moments are when we really figure out how the viruses or other microbes that we're studying respond.
Right. Those aha moments are always good.
They are. They're fun.
What do you enjoy most about what you do as a professor and as a researcher?
Yeah, it's the true interaction with other researchers at various stages of their careers. It's really just, it's great for me. Undergraduates, I'm very supportive of them coming in and gaining research experience, but knowing full well they have a hard time balancing all their studies and all their other obligations as a student with getting the research done, and yet they try and do as much as they can. Graduate students are much more invested time-wise because they're pursuing a degree, and therefore I have a lot of time spent with them and a longer duration. They typically are with me for 5 to 6 years, so we really get to collaborate on a wide variety of studies. And then the other group who I interact with a lot within my own research group are postdocs, who are often here for a much shorter period of time. They already have their PhD, they come in and they're with me for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they're really just hitting the ground running, trying to get as much data as they can, as quickly as possible, turn that into publication so that they can further advance their own career objectives. So my point is I enjoy interacting with scientists at a wide variety of levels, and they each have their own particular kind of things they're searching for and challenged by, and I like navigating them through that process.
That's good. What was the process of starting your own research lab at Yale, and why there?
Yeah, why here? That's a good question. I came out of graduate school. I then did 3 postdocs, so I had a lot of training after graduate school to kind of build up my credentials across a variety of study systems. And I finally got to the point where I had built up enough publications and knowledge that I guess I must have looked like an attractive candidate in terms of hiring, right? So I went on a whole bunch of job interviews. I was very fortunate to do some 10 interviews in the year in which I finally got a job. So the fact that I did a lot of interviews, I had a lot of offers, I had the opportunity to decide where to go. And to tell you the truth, coming here to Yale was a calculated risk. It's not a place where people always get tenure. And yet it is a place that has abundant resources that it sets you up very well to try to pursue getting tenure. And if you have everything go your way and you work as hard as possible, it can work for you. So I basically took that bet. I decided to go to a place where I knew I would be surrounded by fantastic researchers and colleagues, and there are very many places that I could have gone. And this is the one I chose, and I'm very happy that it did work in my favor. I gained tenure here, and I guess that means I'm a permanent employee, and they would have a tough time getting rid of me. But I've enjoyed my time.
Right. And when you say tenured, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so that actually, I'm glad you asked that, because I use that word and some people have no idea what I'm talking about. So essentially, in the USA, when you are a professor in academia at a college or university, and if they have a tenure system, it means that you are hired on contracts that are renewed, and then finally you go through an evaluation process to see whether you have the kind of credentials that they should make you a lifetime employee of their university. And why that? So in an academic setting, whether it's in the humanities or the sciences, the culture in the USA and several other countries is that you've earned the ability to be a trusted member of the community such that you can really become a free thinker. You can pursue whatever you want through scholarship and your academic pursuits. They are giving you the guarantee of employment so that you don't feel constrained in what you ambitiously want to pursue in your scholarship. So basically, that's what I benefit from, is that I've built my credentials. I'm now a lifetime employee, and I could pursue whatever I want. It gives me the freedom of doing the research that I choose to do.
Wow, that's really incredible. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. What is the best, or when did you first start to have an interest in your field of study?
Yeah, it goes back a ways. When I was a kid, I was an avid reader, and some of that was fiction and science fiction, but I always kind of gravitated to natural systems and biology. I was just kind of interested in biology growing up. Enjoyed going to places like the zoo where I would see nature right before my eyes, and also getting out into nature. I was fortunate of growing up mostly in the Bay Area of California, and we didn't live that far from some natural areas. And then when I was in 3rd grade, I moved to upstate New York, outside of the city of Syracuse. So in that local environment, the street I lived on was literally adjacent to some woods. So I would wander around with my friends in the woods and just sort of check stuff out. And that to me was interesting enough that it really I had maintained my interest in biology. I go to college, ended up initially going into engineering and finding that I didn't like it. And fortunately, I was at a University of Rochester in particular, that they had strong biology, and I got more interested in going back to what was a childhood fascination with biology. And it's therefore not surprising I ended up becoming a professional biologist because I just have always been interested in biology, and I feel very fortunate that I've found a profession where I could study it every day.
Yeah, definitely feel like most people uh, don't really find that early on, but for you to find that interest early on really set you up.
Yeah, I feel very happy, and I have close friends who some of them enjoy their jobs, some of them don't, and it shouldn't be taken for granted that if you find a profession that you really enjoy going to every day, then that's really awesome. My particular flavor of biology that I study now, I would not have predicted that I would do this. So in a sense, the evolutionary biology part, I've always been fascinated by biodiversity, and I was a reader of some popular uh, scientists who wrote books for the popular, for the public, I should say. People like Stephen Jay Gould and Carl Zimmer, and people who are great science writers. Those were the ones I gravitated to reading their work when I was younger. And the microbiology part, that's what surprises me, that I'm a professional microbiologist. I always kind of thought, until entering graduate school, I kind of thought I would be studying things like creatures in the African savanna, lions, zebras, crocodiles, really these big charismatic creatures that I grew up loving. And then I realized after getting to graduate school that there's a lot of power in addressing general questions in biology using the smallest inhabitants of the planet. There's a lot of things that come along with that are convenient, like being able to do experiments on organisms with huge population sizes. It gives you the variation within them for evolution to act on them and for you to see changes in your populations as you're studying them in the laboratory. So I entered graduate school and I talked with my advisor about my interest in coevolution, and he and I agreed that, I should give it a shot doing my work using microbes and seeing if that really satisfied my curiosity for chasing these questions, and luckily it did.
That's good. Okay. What is the best story in your career?
Well, that's hard to say. I have to be careful about what I say because there have been so many good ones with so many great collaborators and students that it's hard to pick a favorite. But I definitely recall one of my favorite aha moments was when I was a postdoc. This was my first postdoc, and it was in the laboratory of Lin Chow, and that was at the time when he had his research group at University of Maryland, College Park. But the point was we were doing experiments with viruses where we would study the ability for multiple virus particles to be inside the same cell versus those same viruses when they had to enter cells on their own. And we started to see this phenomenon evolving in our experiments where the ones that were inside the cell with each other were cheating on each other and using resources brought into that cell by these other viruses to their advantage to gain a competitive edge. And we saw a parallel into what is called mathematical game theory. When people talk about, in this particular situation, what's your best strategy? And sometimes your best strategy is to take advantage of your opponent and cheat to gain an advantage. And to that point, no one had kind of layered the game theory in to the virus evolution experiments to look for evidence of whether they were doing this in a way that followed those mathematical results. And indeed, they were. And Lin Chow and I kind of really got into this, and we were having discussions looking at our own data. And I'll never forget that advice he gave to me was, Paul, you have to listen to the viruses. You have to see what data they are presenting because it could be surprising and it could take you down some road of discovery that you hadn't anticipated. And our papers that we produced on this phenomenon in game theory called the prisoner's dilemma. When do you decide to use a strategy of cheating and essentially ratting on your conspirator to the police in order to make sure you do less jail time? kind of feeds into the general strategy that humans often employ of selfishly acting for their own good. And we saw that play out in our virus experiments, and it was a wonderful realization of how a very different body of theory can relate to the experiments that we observed, and it helped explain them fully.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, how has your career impacted your personal life?
I've always been aware that it's hard to achieve a work-life balance. And I knew pretty early on, I heard other graduate students talking about it and postdocs that were in my department. And as I went through my stages of my career, the real problem with being a professional scientist in academia and in many other settings is that you never actually finish your job. It's not like you ever go home and you're like, well, that was a good day. I painted that wall, or I built that bridge component, or, it's like there's nothing you can sort of go home and just necessarily take it easy and walk away from your job. Instead, you always have the opportunity to add some more written work to a paper that you're working on. You can work on a grant that you're trying to pursue. You can work on a lecture that you have to eventually finish for the next class or the class of the following week. There's just all this long, long list of things that you never, ever, ever finish. And you better embrace that as a challenge of your job. Otherwise, I think you can be pretty unhappy in my profession. So instead, I've always seen it as, it's got a long list of things that I'll never probably conquer ever, but I just keep whittling away at the list, and then things get added to the list. But at the same time, I am fortunate to have a family. I have a wife and 2 beautiful daughters, and I want to spend time with them. So I selfishly guard my time, and I'm highly efficient at what I do, so that when I am at work, I want to be efficiently getting things done, such that when I get home at night, I can spend time with my family. And sure, maybe later in the evening after my kids have done with homework and they've gone to bed, and I can get back to answering emails and writing papers. But I really enjoy being with them, and I want to be part of their lives. And that means that I have to balance what's going on. And you know what, frankly, to me, another good side of that, aside from being part of my kids and my wife's daily life, is that I avoid burnout. I feel like a lot of scientists, because they see this long list of things that they never ever finish, they might be so stressed to finish them and never getting to the finish line, that it really stresses them out, and they just feel like, I can't handle it anymore, and they succumb to what is typically called burnout. And then they just become turned off by their job, and they just don't want to do it anymore. And I don't feel threatened by that. At times I feel that, but I feel like I balance things enough that I'm avoiding burnout.
Right. Finding that balance is definitely key.
Yeah, finding a balance is always the key in very many professions, and it's definitely the key in the profession that I'm in.
All right. One last question, Dr. Turner. If you could give advice to a younger Paul Turner, what would you tell him?
What would it be?
Yeah.
Wow. I think maybe my advice would be similar to what I hear a lot of other scientists advising their students, and what I advise my own students, is that there are certain skill sets that if you acquire them, it broadens your ability to get a job down the line. So you hear a lot in graduate school and postdoc work in biology and other fields that you want to build your toolkit. You want to make sure that you have enough kind of methods and approaches that you're an expert on, that especially currently when I was pursuing jobs in academia, there were just literally more jobs available for PhDs coming out, and now there are not. So I'm very mindful of telling my students, make sure you could do, say, some aspect of mathematical theory, genome sequence analysis, and other things that people see as very useful, because it's going to make you be an attractive candidate in academia, but it also might make you an attractive candidate in, say, industry, working for a pharmaceutical company, working some aspect of computer science and how it interfaces with biology. Lots and lots of job opportunities can be available to you if you have a broad skill set. So if I could go back in time, I would definitely do more work to train myself, give myself the advice of go learn more probability and statistics to the point of being very good at being a card-carrying, say, biostatistician. Be someone who is more capable than I currently am of generating theoretical predictions in a computer simulation or a mathematical model. Go back and look a little forward thinking in terms of those skill sets I could have obtained when I had more time available to do it. Now I could go to some workshop or whatever and gain those skills, but I have hardly any time to do it. And maybe when my daughters leave home and go off to college, I'll have more time. You'll see me sitting, for all you know, in some workshop, across the room. And like, hey, I know that guy. He was the one who said he wanted to go to a workshop, and you might just be sitting in the room with me, because I still think that we always can be challenging ourselves to learn new things. And hindsight is 20/20, as they say. There's lots of advice I could give myself back then if I could go back in time. But really, maybe my main point is just always be a learner. Don't shy away from learning new things, because that's part of what I love about my job. Is there's always something new to learn. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a professional scientist. It's all about exploring the unknown. So you need to embrace that and just chase new knowledge.
Right, staying curious about different aspects, I guess, of life.
Yeah.
And like you said, definitely building your toolbox and carrying more skills that could benefit you in the future.
Broaden your toolkit and never lose your curiosity for the natural world, because it's never going to stop presenting us with interesting things to discover. That's
true.
Definitely the case.
All right, well, that concludes our interview questions, Professor Turner. So thank you so much for joining me today, giving me the time to be able to interview you. So.
Oh, you're quite welcome.